Close your eyes and listen to the sound of a city that never sleeps, a relentless roar of engines, sirens, and the footsteps of 8 million souls. Imagine if you could reach out and peel back the steel and glass, stripping away the neon lights of Times Square and the shadows of the skyscrapers until the concrete dissolves back into the earth. What would you find beneath the pavement of the world's most intense metropolis? And how did a tiny, muddy outpost of fur traders become the blueprint for the modern world? This journey into the forgotten heart of Manhattan has been meticulously reconstructed using advanced artificial intelligence to breathe life into the ghosts of the past. Before we descend into the year 1660, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and join our community of explorers as we uncover the hidden mechanisms of history. The New York you know is a creature of noise and motion, a global crossroads where the intensity of human ambition is felt in every breath. It is a city of verticality, defined by the reach of its towers and the depth of its subways, a place where the natural world has been almost entirely subdued. Yet, if we conduct a thought experiment and remove the grid, the bridges, and the bedrock-anchored foundations, a different island emerges. This was Manahatta, the island of many hills, a rugged landscape of ancient forests, salt marshes, and a shoreline that shifted with every tide. Here, the daily rhythm was dictated not by the stock ticker, but by the migration of birds and the flow of the Hudson River. In the year 1660, Manhattan was a raw green jewel set in the cold waters of the Atlantic, known to the Lenape people for generations. At its southern tip, a small, fragile settlement was beginning to take shape, a collection of high-gabled houses that looked as if they had been plucked from the streets of Amsterdam. This was New Amsterdam, a tiny Dutch toehold on a vast continent, appearing insignificant against the backdrop of the wilderness. However, even in its infancy, this village carried the genetic code of a future world city, a place where the pursuit of profit would eventually reshape the planet. It was a town built on the edge of the known world, serving as a gateway between the old empires of Europe and the untapped riches of the Americas. New Amsterdam was never intended to be a romantic colony or a religious refuge for those seeking a new beginning in the wilderness. It was introduced to the world as a cold, profit-driven outpost of the Dutch West India Company, a corporate entity with its own army and navy. Using advanced artificial intelligence to analyze the historic Castello plan, we can now see the settlement exactly as it was designed, a machine for commerce. The layout was not dictated by aesthetic glory or spiritual devotion, but by the practical needs of moving goods and maximizing efficiency. Every street, every dock, and every plot of land was an entry in a ledger, part of a calculated experiment in global capitalism. Our exploration begins at Fort Amsterdam, a utilitarian stronghold that stood as the symbol of Dutch authority on the island. This was not a grand castle, but a functional complex serving as a military base, a secure warehouse for valuable pelts, and the seat of the colonial government. Within these earthen walls, the air was thick with the scent of gunpowder and damp timber, reflecting the constant state of readiness required in a volatile frontier. This was the domain of Director-General Peter Stuyvesant, a man who embodied the colony's hard-edged, executive leadership style. Stuyvesant was not a diplomat by nature, but a soldier administrator who viewed the inhabitants as employees of the company rather than citizens of a state. Outside the fort, the atmosphere was one of controlled chaos, where the sounds of a dozen different languages collided in the salty air. You would hear the tallying of beaver pelts, the heavy thud of crates being moved, and the sharp bartering of merchants from across the Atlantic. Diversity in New Amsterdam was not an idealistic choice or a moral stance. It was a practical necessity driven by the demands of trade and survival. To the Dutch West India Company, it did not matter where a man came from or what god he worshipped, as long as he could contribute to the bottom line. This transactional approach to human identity created a unique social vacuum where pragmatic cooperation took precedence over ancestral grudges. Just beyond the protective shadow of the fort lay an open common ground that would one day be known to the world as Bowling Green. In the year 1660, this space functioned as the informal civic center of the town, a place for markets, news, and political gatherings. It was here that the residents of New Amsterdam met to discuss the latest ships arriving from Europe or the fluctuating price of tobacco. This patch of grass was the birthplace of New York's public life, a neutral zone where the private interests of merchants met the collective needs of the community. It was a space defined by the flow of information, serving as the town's primitive nervous system. Following the shoreline along Pearl Street, the true wealth of the colony began to reveal itself in the homes of the merchant elite. These were not the crude log cabins often associated with early American frontier life, but sophisticated brick townhouses with stepped gables and large windows. The presence of these structures signaled that the Dutch intended to stay and that they brought the comforts of European urban life with them. Pearl Street was the front row of the harbor, a place where the most successful traders could keep a watchful eye on their ships and their fortunes. These homes were monuments to the success of the middle class, proving that in this new world, trade could elevate a man faster than any noble title. Inside these merchant houses, the rooms were filled with luxury goods that spoke of a truly global reach. One might find porcelain from China, fine silks from Persia, and spices from the East Indies, all resting on heavy oak furniture made in the Dutch style. In New Amsterdam, power was not measured by the ancient lineage of one's family, but by one's position within the vast web of international commerce. The ability to acquire these objects was a testament to a merchant's skill in navigating the treacherous waters of the 17th century economy. These interiors reflected a culture that valued tangible success and the display of wealth as a form of social currency.
5 stuvers, madam. The quality is unmatched.
It seems you bring good things to the settlement.
Turning away from the water and onto Stone Street, the focus shifts from the elite to the ordinary residents who kept the town running. Stone Street was one of the first roads in the colony to be paved, a small but significant act of collective problem-solving. This improvement was funded by the residents themselves, demonstrating an early commitment to urban infrastructure and the common good. The street was lined with taverns, which dominated the social and professional lives of the people, acting as the primary venues for human interaction. In these dimly lit rooms, the future of the city was being negotiated one drink at a time. Taverns in New Amsterdam functioned as much more than places to consume alcohol. They were the community's meeting halls, newsrooms, and business exchanges. It was within these walls that the town's defining trait began to emerge, a tolerance rooted in economic usefulness rather than moral philosophy. Men of different faiths and backgrounds would sit at the same table to discuss a shipping contract or a land deal. They learned that the friction of diversity could be lubricated by the shared pursuit of a profit. This was a cold, calculated form of pluralism, but it provided a stability that more ideological colonies often lacked. A pivotal moment in the colony's history occurred with the arrival of a group of Jewish refugees seeking a place to live and trade. Despite the initial resistance of Peter Stuyvesant, the Dutch West India Company ordered that these newcomers be allowed to stay and contribute to the economy. The company's decision established a lasting pattern for the future of the city, decreeing that faith was secondary to an individual's ability to work and trade. This moment planted the first seed of New York's multicultural identity, proving that the city would always be open to those who could add value. It was a victory for pragmatism over prejudice, a theme that would define the city for the next 4 centuries.
That's it. Keep the rhythm steady.
The skyline of the town was not marked by soaring cathedrals or grand monuments, but by the functional silhouettes of windmills and shipyards. The rhythmic creaking of the sails and the constant hammering from the docks formed an early industrial symphony. These structures reflected a culture that was intensely focused on productivity, infrastructure, and the physical transformation of the environment. The Dutch were masters of engineering, and they applied their knowledge of water management to the marshes of Manhattan with tireless energy. Every windmill was a declaration of human intent, a machine designed to harness the wind to grind the grain that fed the growing population.
Stay close to the fire.
What was that sound?
Rather than investing in symbols of divine or royal power, the Dutch directed their resources toward canals, wharves, and logistics. Broad Street was originally a canal, a functional artery that allowed small boats to carry goods directly into the heart of the residential and business district. This was an echo of the landscape of Old Amsterdam, an attempt to recreate a familiar system of transport in a foreign land. The transformation of the natural landscape into a structured, efficient harbor was the primary goal of the colonial administration. This focus on the how of commerce rather than the why of existence gave the town its distinctive, restless energy.
Did you hear that rustling?
Keep moving, it's probably just the wind.
What was that?
However, this story of prosperity and innovation also contains a dark and enduring contradiction in the form of systemic inequality. The wealth of New Amsterdam was built, in part, on the labor of enslaved Africans who occupied a precarious and restricted position under Dutch rule. While they were granted some limited rights, such as the ability to marry and testify in court, they remained under the enduring coercion of the company. Their presence was a constant reminder that the Dutch experiment in freedom and trade was not intended for everyone. This moral failure was woven into the very fabric of the colony, creating a legacy of division that would haunt the city for generations to come. As the settlement expanded northward, relations with the indigenous Lenape people became increasingly marked by tension and violent conflict. The Dutch viewed the land as a commodity to be fenced and deeded, a concept that was fundamentally at odds with the Lenape's relationship to the earth. To create a defensive perimeter, the company granted land to half-free, enslaved Africans on the outskirts of the town. These farmers were strategically placed to serve as a human buffer between the Dutch settlement and the volatile frontier. It was a ruthless use of vulnerable people to protect the interests of the merchant class, highlighting the cold logic of the colonial authorities.
I got the boat!
Hooray! Great job, you two!
At the northern edge of the town stood a defensive wall made of heavy wooden palisades, a structure that would give its name to the most famous financial street in the world. This wall marked the physical boundary between the perceived civilization of the Dutch town and the perceived wilderness beyond. Citizen soldiers patrolled this line, embodying a community that was constantly on edge and aware of its own fragility. The wall was a symbol of the fear that accompanied the pursuit of wealth in a contested land. It reminded every resident that the peace of the market was only as strong as the fortifications that protected it. The fate of New Amsterdam was eventually sealed not by a dramatic battle or a heroic last stand, but by a cold, hard calculation of interest. In the year 1664, when English warships appeared in the harbor, the merchants of the town faced a critical choice. Peter Stuyvesant wanted to fight to the death to defend the Dutch flag, but the business leaders of the community refused to see their property destroyed. They realized that their contracts, their warehouses, and their trade routes were more important than which European king claimed sovereignty over the soil. They chose to surrender the colony to the English, ensuring that the business of the city would continue without interruption.
And the industrious nature of the original Dutch settlers in New Amsterdam.
Look closer. Beneath the surface.
Although the town was renamed New York, the Dutch spirit was not erased. It simply went underground, becoming the foundation upon which the English built their empire. The traits of pluralism, commerce, and relentless pragmatism remained the defining characteristics of the inhabitants. Unlike the more ideological or religious colonies in New England or the South, New York remained a place where the deal was king. The Dutch influence persisted in the legal codes, the architectural styles, and the social attitudes that distinguished the city from its neighbors. It was a transition of power that preserved the essential character of the place, proving that the city's identity was stronger than its name. Today, the echoes of New Amsterdam are still visible if you know where to look in the modern street patterns of Lower Manhattan. The winding, narrow lanes of the financial district follow the paths laid out by Dutch surveyors more than 3 centuries ago. The concept of apartment living, the density of the urban core, and even the holiday of Santa Claus can be traced back to these early settlers. The past remains deeply embedded in the city's physical and cultural DNA, a hidden layer that continues to influence how millions of people live and work. The city is a living palimpsest, where the modern world is constantly being written over the ancient blueprints of the Dutch. The story of New Amsterdam concludes with a defining insight. New York was not built by conquest or by a shared religious ideology, but by the power of agreements. Trade became the glue that allowed a diverse and often fractious population to function together in a small space. It was the realization that we do not have to like each other or even believe in the same things to work together for mutual benefit. This contract-based society allowed for a level of social mobility and innovation that was unprecedented in the 17th century. It was the birth of the modern idea that a person's value is defined by their contribution to the collective economy.
This playground is going to be amazing.
The kids are gonna love it.
Standing at the edge of the harbor today, looking out at the Statue of Liberty and the Verrazano Bridge, we are reminded that this was the starting point of the global city. The name New Amsterdam vanished from the maps long ago, but its pulse never stopped beating in the heart of the metropolis. It invites us to reflect on the nature of our own society and the compromises we make in the pursuit of prosperity. It forces us to ask if a city built on contracts can ever truly provide a sense of belonging to all its inhabitants. The ghosts of the Dutch merchants and the Lenape hunters still linger in the shadows of the skyscrapers, watching as we continue their experiment.
This fundamentally alters the historical context.
We need everyone phone banking.
The history of this island teaches us a vital lesson for our own lives, that the most enduring structures are not made of stone or steel, but of the relationships and agreements we forge with one another. In a world that often feels divided by ideology and belief, perhaps we can find common ground in the practical work of building something together. We should remember that diversity is not just a moral goal, but a source of strength that allows us to adapt and thrive in a changing world. Let us look at the people around us not as strangers, but as potential partners in the ongoing creation of our shared future. We must ask ourselves, what are the walls we are building today, and are they protecting us or simply keeping us from the world beyond?
In this light, what is the Dutch legacy I see reflected in these modern times?
This is truly inspiring.
Thank you for joining me on this journey through the hidden layers of history and for allowing the past to speak to your present. I wish you good health, clear vision, and the courage to find your own path in the vast, complex machinery of the world. If you found this exploration of New Amsterdam thought-provoking, please consider subscribing to the channel to help us continue uncovering the stories that shaped our modern existence. What part of the Dutch legacy do you see most clearly in the world today? Leave a comment below and join the conversation as we explore the alternate histories and forgotten truths of our shared human story.